Welcome to the Women Living Well After 50 podcast. I'm Sulon Carrick and I'm passionate about inspiring, motivating, supporting and informing women over 50 to embrace this exciting time of life. Health and wellness in mind, body and spirit are the foundations for living well, but there is so much more to a life well lived. Each week, through conversations with my guests, I'll be presenting topics that will help us all to live well and enjoy life. So join me as we discover new ways to become women living well after 50. Are you ready to start living? What are you waiting for? Let's get started. Thanks for joining me for another Women Living Well After 50 podcast. I'm Sulon Carrick and it's great to have you join me. Now today I'm delighted to be introducing some guests, and we're going to be talking about empty nest best life, keys to building relationships with young adult children, and also finding purpose, engagement and positive emotion in the empty nest. My guest today is Karen Herbert, who with her husband Curtis are professional coaches who help mums find their treasure as they step into the empty nest phase. 5 years ago, Karen was drained by chronic illness and under siege with parenting crisis. She met with a life coach and realised she could create a life she loved despite everything. She eventually became a certified coach herself and started a coaching practice. At the time, her husband Curtis was a practicing law partner and serving high-tech entrepreneurs. He invested in his own transformation and also became a coach. Currently, Karen and Curtis are focused on helping mums entering the empty nest to create a life of personal satisfaction and joy filled with their own unique contribution to the world. Their signature program is the Life in Abundance coaching program, where they help women create fulfilling lives they can enjoy with no regrets. So let's go and join the conversation. Welcome, Karen. It's lovely to have you join me on the Women Living Well After 50 podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a joy to be here.
Right. Now, it's actually a holiday over in the States today, so thanks for making the time. And as you said before, everyone's relaxing and taking some time out, so that's good. Mm-hmm. Now, before we start, today we're going to be talking about the empty nest. We're going to be talking about our purpose, passion, building relationships with our young adult children. But before we start that, I want to go back and have you share your story and just give my listeners a little bit of background about you and what led you to your current path and just, a little bit about your history.
I would love to. Thanks so much for asking. My name is Karen Herbert. I have 3 young adults myself from ages 18 to 22. And I've been married to my husband, Curtis, for 22 years. And a little bit of my story is I had a very challenging time as a parent. We had a lot of special needs and challenges in our family. And I brought a lot of my energy, my investment to my family over the years. And there was a time about 5 years ago when I was feeling particularly burdened by my own chronic health issues and the needs of my family and the limitations that we were encountering as a family. And that's when I really reached out and looked for some extra support because my vision was really starting to narrow and it was hard to see hope and possibility and look ahead to the future. All of that was very difficult for me. And over time, in working with my own life coach, I was able to really start to carve out some pieces of my life that I felt like really gave me purpose and meaning and engagement and allowed me to really refresh myself and bring the best of myself to my family and the needs around me. And that was a big deal for me because I had to do a lot of internal work to release fears and attachments and my own worries for my family in order to create that space for myself. It's been extremely life-giving. It's led to our current business where I work with my husband serving empty nest women in the Life in Abundance program. So it's borne a lot of fruit, yet it came from really a period of great difficulty for me that became transformed.
Mm. And I think that when you do go through those personal experiences, you really are then able to tap into helping others more, I think, because you've gone through it, you've been there. So you know what other women are feeling. And I think that for me, I've not been in the empty nest for many years. I'm older, but for me, I went through more of an experience when I was retiring. So I do think the topics we're talking about today are transferable. You know, we might be focusing on empty nest women, but I also can see, even reading your information that you've sent through, that there are parallels that I actually went through when I retired from work with what was my purpose, that sort of thing. So the empty nest is it can be a difficult period for women in particular, and I'm sure for men, but women who have been the caregivers or the primary caregivers, and perhaps some women who've their main career has been the family. They get to a point in their life where the children are leaving, and there's that void that they're not sure what to do. So why do you think mothers often unconsciously leave their own future choices in the hands of others as they transition through this empty nest phase?
Well, one thing I found with the clients I've worked with is there's this really beautiful spirit of service that moms have towards their families. And it just becomes habitual. It becomes just how we are in our family. And what I find is that the image I like to use is that, you know, we're working with all these puzzle pieces in our life. And we just fall into this habit of waiting to see where everybody else is going to place their puzzle piece. And then we sort of fit ourselves in sideways, wherever there is space. And sometimes I'll hear people say, well, moms put themselves last, they should put themselves first. But the language Curtis and I like to use is moms need to put themselves in the mix. We are a puzzle piece. We are a person in the family, and our needs and concerns are just on the common ground with everyone else. And we can all shift our pieces to really make things work for everyone. But many of us as moms, it's hard for us to do that. And we get to the empty nest and we find we haven't been doing that. And we're just in this habit of letting everybody else make decisions, and we just fit ourselves in wherever. And we've sort of lost this vision of intentionality for our life. And very often we can find ourselves, frankly, for the next 20 years, just wandering through life and living up to sort of the plans that everyone else has for us in this season of our life, rather than taking intentional control over what we would like to create in the next season.
I love your point there about the fact that the way you and Curtis describe a woman's position in the empty nest. It's not, because I think a lot of us, yes, we've been told, or we see it everywhere, you know, put your needs first, you've got to look after yourself, you can't pour from an empty cup, all those sort of things. But of course the mother guilt comes into that and says, oh, I can't put myself before my family. But I love the way that you've got that analogy of just putting yourself in on a level playing field with everyone else, because your needs are just as important. You're not putting them ahead of anyone else, you're putting them together. And I think that a lot of women would probably feel more comfortable viewing it that way than following the path of, well, you've got to put your own needs first, because I just don't think we can comfortably do that without that guilt.
It's very, very difficult. And in the end, it's not really what we want. We just want to be in the mix with everyone else.
I love that. Now, you talk about women needing to have an exploration mindset. What do you mean by that?
Well, I think I mentioned before that it's very easy to sort of unconsciously move into this season of life without intention. And we can find ourselves wandering, not really sure what our interests are. Many women say, I don't even know what I'm interested in anymore. I don't know what engages me because I haven't invested in that for so long. And what lights me up? Well, I don't know. So there's this process often of having to re-engage with who we are and what we even want and what lights us up in this phase of life, so that we're not wandering without purpose, but we're gently exploring where those new places are that we'd like to invest and bring our, by this point, very wise and experienced selves to, because we have a unique contribution to bring to the world, particularly in this phase of life. There's so much that we have to bring. And we like the exploration process because on the one hand, you're using some intention to set some goals to explore, but at the same time, you're not creating an intense structure that you're trying to fit yourself into. So we don't like wandering, but we don't really like strategic plans either. We feel like we don't know enough in this transition to be able to set, extreme 20-year goals. I mean, some people can, but many of us, we need that interior process for a while to reset and re-identify with ourselves and explore what's next for us.
And I think that's the point, you've been in a certain role for so long and you might have worn many hats, mother, partner, career, mother, daughter, so many different hats. And then suddenly when it's just your time, you have forgotten what things used to bring you joy, what things light you up. And I think that a lot of women perhaps feel that they have to, my children have left, or in my case, I've left my job. I've got to fill that void immediately. But your advice is to sort of take a step back, connect with yourself, don't rush into anything, and also don't put the pressure on yourself, which I think is a very good point that you made.
Yes, exactly. I couldn't agree more. And I feel like sometimes it's treated very simplistically. Well, now you have a void. Well, get a different job, volunteer, find a hobby, all of which I'm a big fan of, but not just to fill your time. Yeah. Do those things with intention and purpose so they have meaning for you.
That's right. And so purpose is something that I've talked a fair bit about on the podcast, but how would you describe purpose in, for a woman in this stage of life, if she's looking for something that, we tend to come a lot with words these days. It doesn't matter what it is. And then after a while, you'll hear a word so often that it just loses its meaning. So what does purpose mean to you?
I love that question, Sue. And I think about it in a number of ways. So there's sort of this basic general meaning of purpose, which is just, it's the hopes and aspirations that motivate us to do something, whatever it is that we're doing. And the thing is, when we look at something more consistent, like say a life purpose, we can find a thread through our lives about very special motivators that we bring to the table in our activities. And they're really rooted in our identity, in our values, in our strengths and gifts. But our purpose is when we bring all of that uniquely to the world in a way that connects us to something that's bigger to ourselves. That's when we're bringing our purpose to the world. So there's a lot of overlap between the purpose I find and who I am, but it's like that intersection between my unique, authentic self showing up in a special way in the world to bring my contribution and connect me to something bigger than myself.
And what advice do you give to women who think, what really have I got to give? Because a lot of us, I mean, people see in us certain qualities and they see what we can do, but sometimes we don't have that confidence within ourselves, or we think, well, what can I offer? So what's your advice to women who have that feeling that they're perhaps not good enough, or they compare themselves to other people and they say, oh, you know, look at her, she's off doing all these wonderful things, she's making a mark in the world, I couldn't be like that. What's your advice to someone who feels that way?
You know, that makes a lot of sense to me, and I do believe it's very common. The thing about purpose is sometimes we can look at others and think, well, that's a large, big purpose they have that they're bringing. But often purpose is very subtle and intertwined with the little things that we do from day to day. So what I find with empty nesting clients is really it's important to go back and do a lot of digging into who we are, who we've thought ourselves to be, that may or may not be serving us, and who we want to be, the real authentic self that we want to bring to the world. And then just we need to sort of bridge that gap, right? What are the fears that are undermining who we want to be and what we want to bring? What are the beliefs that are pulling us down? What are the experiences we've had that perhaps aren't allowing us to invest fully in where we want to go? And how can we move past those fears and limiting beliefs to really embrace who we want to be? And values work, I find, is so beautiful when we can go through a process where we're crystal clear about our top 5 values and exactly what they mean to us, how we define them, why they're important to us, and we lay that out. It's like a beautiful mirror of who we are. And then we can intentionally bring that to all the arenas of our life. I had a client once and she had this beautiful saying. She just said, it's like I'm taking my values and I'm painting them on to the canvas of my life. And I thought that was such a beautiful image about how she's choosing to show up and bring her uniqueness to the world.
That's lovely. So I want to talk now a little bit about the relationship. You know, your children grow up, and as a mother, I suppose it's difficult not to always think of them as your children, because they do grow up to be adults who make their own decisions and follow their own path in life. And I like to think that I've encouraged my children to do that, but still the mother, you know, in you worries about them and that sort of thing. So, and you do get to a point sometimes where as you get older, perhaps you feel as if your children have overtaken you and you don't quite have that same relationship. So again, I'm saying that what we're talking about today, even though it's about the empty nest, it does correlate with a retirement period as well, where almost as you get older, you feel like you're the child and the adult, and the child is the adult. So how do you maintain and build quality relationships with your children when they do leave and go out into their own lives?
Yes. Well, it's so interesting what you just said, because there really are so many different layers to the relationship transition over the years. It is not stagnant. I mean, really, if you think about it, from the moment they're born, that's not stagnant. It's always changing. And this shift from being a teen to a young adult into an adult child is really huge in the relationship. And the first thing I think I want to say is we have to be ready to accept the change of the relationship. We have to be willing to let the relationship change because it's intended to, it's meant to over time become more and more of a peer relationship. I mean, you never lose the mom-child dynamic, but it is intended to become more of a peer relationship. And along the way, we have to decide that our goal is really about the relationship. Our goal is to create a strong, healthy, loving adult relationship with our kids. And that's very challenging because often our goals get stuck in the outcomes we want for our kids, what we want to see them accomplish, who we want to see them be, how we want them to act, even as adults. But that's not our goal anymore. Our goal is to create the loving, healthy adult relationship with our child. And the research shows that there's two main things that young adults really hate when it comes to relating to their parents. Two things it's very hard for them, especially as they're trying to create their own identity and understand their own new relationship to the family. The first one is they hate to feel judged. They hate to feel judged by their parents. They love us. They want our affirmation. They want our support and approval. And they're very sensitive, right, to things that maybe we aren't intending to be judgmental about, but they perceive it in that way. So there's a lot of sensitivity on their part about feeling judged. So it's really important to make a commitment to show up in a non-judgmental, validating way with our young adults where they can receive the validation, they can receive the support and not feel judged. That's number one. Number two is they hate unsolicited advice. It's just very difficult to receive advice because honestly, it comes across judgmentally. They perceive it as, well, you're giving me advice, so I must be doing something wrong and you want to tell me how to do it right. So we advise all of our clients to always ask permission before giving advice and to do it freely, right? So there's not like, can I share a suggestion with you, but really you better take my suggestion. It's, may I share a suggestion with you? Or may I share an experience that I've had in this area? Or may I offer an idea or make a comment? And it just allows them to feel like they have the freedom to engage with us or not engage with us. They have the freedom to say yes or no. And if they say no, and that no is respected by us, it goes such a long way to really strengthen that relationship. They feel validated. They feel like they're becoming an adult, like what they do matters and what they think matters, and that their no is respected.
And I think that's the key, isn't it? I was thinking about the fact that they would also feel you trust them and that you accept that they can make their own decisions. And whilst we want to make everything in life easy for our children, they won't ever learn unless they have experiences. And we do want to protect them from making wrong decisions. But I liked your point about saying that we need to recognize that the relationship moves more into a peer relationship rather than, so you wouldn't probably, I suppose you need to think about how you would relate to a friend or a peer. You wouldn't necessarily be putting your ideas and telling them what to do. So I think you have to learn to be a little bit that way with your children, because as you say, they will then feel validated. They'll feel more confident within themselves. Would you agree with that?
I would completely agree. I think you're spot on. And in fact, what I've observed is that it's actually very empowering to be given space to make our own mistakes and to learn from them. There is something empowering about taking ownership of that. And yes, we want to know that our parents will support us as we pick ourselves up, but it's like it's my thing, right? It's my thing to mess up or my thing to succeed in. And there's just something very empowering about that.
So tell me a little bit about your a Life in Abundance coaching program.
Oh, I would love to. Thank you for asking. Our coaching program is a 6-month program, and it's for women who are entering the empty nest or in that empty nest transition. And what I love about it is it's just become this amazing community of supportive women who are encouraging each other in the transition and in all these areas of the transition, right? The relating to our young adults, finding our new purpose, trying to explore where we're going next and what we're going to invest in. We're reinvesting in our relationships with our partners if we have them. There's just so much going on in this phase. And there's just something very beautiful about being able to walk through all of that together. So we obviously have content that we provide, but the magic happens when we come together in our coaching sessions to share the journey and really dig in and apply all of what we want to this time of life.
So is that like a group coaching sessions, or do you have one-on-one as well?
We have, those would be group coaching sessions in the program, and but we do meet one-on-one monthly so that there's ongoing accountability for people to know, okay, what am I trying to get out of this? How am I getting there? What else do I need? So we can have a good sense of how people are being transformed and how we can serve them in that process.
And I like the idea of the group coaching because all members of the group would be going through the same experience, but experiencing it in different ways, so they can share, you know, what's working for them, what hasn't worked for them, and I think that would be beneficial to everyone in the group, because you can always learn from someone else, can't you? And not feeling that you're alone in going through that particular phase of life.
Exactly, you're spot on.
Yes. So in talking about that, what could you share with us perhaps your 3 top tips for what women can do? Well, first of all, do you suggest that perhaps women, we all know when the empty nest is probably going to hit. So would you suggest perhaps thinking about that period before you actually arriving at it? So as you say, start perhaps doing some work before your children leave home.
If it's possible, I highly encourage that. That was what happened to me. And I just felt like it was so beneficial, even though those years are so busy. And there were times when I could only do a very little bit to look ahead and think about where things were going to be and be intentional. It was, even that little bit was so effective and so worth it in the end. And it's hard when everything is chaotic to get to the next place, but just thinking ahead enough to appreciate that what we're doing as our kids are approaching the empty nest will really serve us as they start to fly the nest, as it were. I do encourage that.
Yeah, I think it's probably better to be prepared, and it lessens the shock a little bit, perhaps. Yes. That, as you say, you might not always have the time to do that, but at least you can be doing some groundwork to work towards that. And again, because I've got older listeners, it's the same thing coming into retirement. you really need to think about what you want in the future, and
Yes.
whilst you're working, perhaps you don't have time to think about it, but even just jotting down little ideas of how you think it might be or what you'd like to do, and then when you do stop working, you can then, it's not just right, you've stopped, what do I do now? You've got a few little ideas that perhaps then you can reflect and take the time to work through. Now, the one other thing I wanted to talk about was, you say that we can have serenity while we have purpose, or how can we have serenity while we pursue what we really want with determination?
Yes. So one thing that we found, and I think it's likely you found this too, Sue, with the transition into retirement, is it can feel very chaotic, and transitions themselves are can be experienced as extremely challenging, and like we're lost, things are out of place. The image I like to use, it's like if you're redoing your kitchen, right? And everything's been pulled out and torn up, and you're sitting there in the chaos, and it's like, there's something new coming, and it's going to be great. But it's only because you know that you can live in the chaos of the moment. So a lot of creating the serenity in the midst of the transition does have to do with learning how to be present in the moment to the transformation and the growth that's happening in the process. So the transition research really does reveal that in the chaos is when a lot of the growth happens, when we are reorienting ourselves personally, our identity is shifting, and what's important to us might even be shifting. And there's a lot of growth that's going on in the transition process. And so it's important to really be present to that, because if we try to move through it too quickly, we might lose some of the beautiful power and effectiveness of that transformation that's going on. So we do mindfulness with our clients. We also pay a lot of attention to self-compassion and how we can be supportive and compassionate to ourselves in the midst of our major life transitions that really allow us to grow as we want to grow, and to calm our anxiety and be present to what's happening.
That self-compassion is so important, and being kind to ourselves, isn't it? Because we just seem to have the bar raised so high for ourselves compared to what we do, expect from others. And we're always so critical and hard on ourselves, and ready to highlight all our failures rather than saying, hey, you're doing the best you can at the moment, or actually talking about your successes. We don't like to do that either. So I think that we do need to be kinder to ourselves, and so it's great that you work on that that self-compassion. So before we go today, I've just got a couple more questions. I wondered if you could just give some advice for women that are listening today on perhaps what 3 things they could do that they can start doing today, whether they're an empty nester or wherever they are in life, that they can start connecting with who they are and finding that purpose, or not purpose, but perhaps what they can do today to feel comfortable about what the future holds.
Yes, I'd love to. Okay, I'm going to have to narrow it down to 3, but that's a great question.
Oh, that's okay. You can do more than 3 if you want, but
that's fine. So one of the things, one of the people we follow, we really like is Martin Seligman. Many people may have heard of him, some people perhaps not. He's a psychologist who really gave a lot of impetus and support to the positive psychology movement. So what makes us happy? What is it that creates a sense of well-being? How can we thrive and flourish as human beings? And he has a signature strengths test for free on the internet. And to be honest, I can't remember the URL to send you to there, but if you Google,
that's okay.
Yeah. Yep. So that's a good place to start. And if you've done some strengths assessments before, it may not be completely different, but it's going to give you a grounding of, okay, I can start here. These are some of the things that I'm bringing. And the truth is, you're bringing them right now where you are, not just in the future. And Seligman also has some tips on that website about leaning into our signature strengths in the activities of our daily life and how transformative it can be to intentionally say, for example, I have this task at work. Maybe it's one that I dislike. And I'm just thinking, well, I can't wait to retire and get rid of this task, right? You can choose a signature strength and intentionally decide, I'm going to show up to this task with this strength. So an example would be, the example he uses is there's this gal who had to work at a grocery store, and she was the cashier, and it was not something that interested her at all. It was dragging her down. But she decided that one of her signature strengths of encouragement and connection, she was going to bring that to that task. And she was going to engage with the people who came through her line with encouragement and connection. And that can really transform your experience of what's happening in the moment. And sometimes I think we know we're doing that with things that are really engaging for us. And we just don't realize what it can do for the things that aren't so engaging for us. So practicing bringing your strengths where you are right now is actually really helpful for thinking about how you're going to bring them to the world in the future. So that would be one tip I would have. A second tip, I'm actually going to take it also from Martin Seligman. It's an exercise called 3 Good Things. And you sit down and you take a piece of paper, you make 3 columns. And on the left-hand side, you write 3 good things that happened to you over the last week. So what brought you positive emotion? What brought you engagement and meaning? And you write your 3 things down. And in the second column, you say, okay, why did that thing happen? What prompted it? What triggered it? What happened in life that brought that about? And in the third column, you say, how could I get more of that? So what happened that gave me positive emotion? Why did it happen? How can I get more of that? And we've actually used this exercise with husbands and wives, with partners, in terms of their relationship. What brings me positive emotion in this relationship? Why did it happen? How can I get more of it? And as I'm saying this, I'm thinking, we haven't used it yet, but it would be awesome to do with our young adult or adult children when we're trying to bring more positivity to those relationships. What have we done that brought the positive emotion? Why was it successful? How can I get more of that in our relationship?
That sounds great. That sounds good. Well, look, it's been lovely having you join me today. Before we go, I always ask my guests the same question, so I'm going to pose it to you. And that is, what does being a woman living well mean to you?
Wow, that is such a great question. It's very comprehensive. It's very comprehensive. And I think for me, it has a lot to do with authenticity. It has a lot to do with knowing myself, knowing who I am, knowing what I bring to the table, and having some confidence to show up that way authentically in my relationships, in my community, in my society. And there's a lot of things that hold us back, or that we fear about showing up authentically. But there's the joy and the beauty of showing up as ourselves is very apparent when we do that. So
that's lovely. And it is living well. If you can get to that stage where you live authentically, you're not trying to put on an act or wear a mask or be anything that you're not, that just brings such a relief, I think, and it brings the true person that you are out to the world. So it's lovely to have chatted with you today, Karen. I've really enjoyed our conversation and the topics that we've talked about. You've been very helpful. So I wondered if you could just tell us, I will put all these links in the show notes, but how can women find you if they want to contact you for perhaps starting your Life in Abundance coaching program, or perhaps just having a chat for other life coaching work?
Yes. I think the best way is to email me, believe it or not. It's Karen, Karen, at themlcoaching.com. And I would love to make a connection with anyone. I've really enjoyed our conversation. I'm so grateful that we connected and we're able to have this time together.
It's been lovely. And just the name of your coaching business, just for people if they want to, I presume you've got a website as well?
We do. It's currently under construction.
Oh, okay.
So it's going to be tricky to find it currently, but the name of our business is Themelios Coaching. It's a Greek word that means foundational.
Oh, I love that, because I did see it and I thought, I wonder if there's a meaning behind that, and there usually is. So thanks again, Karen. Wonderful advice for not just empty nesters, but those that are perhaps going to retirement, and how we can find our purpose, but also build those relationships with our children as they move into adulthood themselves. And it's just been lovely chatting to you today, and I'm really thank you for taking the time to chat with me today on the podcast.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Well, it was great talking to Karen today about approaching the empty nest and how we can cope with that and to find our intention and purpose. We also talked about how to keep a connection and build new relationships with our children as they leave home and move into adulthood. It also can translate to any transition in life. If you're heading towards retirement or the empty nest, lots of changes will be happening. So Karen covered quite a few points today, which I found valuable myself. I'll be leaving all the links to Karen and Curtis's information in the website. I'd love you to leave me a review if you enjoyed the podcast, and also share it with a friend who you know will benefit from the conversation. That's all we have for today. I'll see you next time with another guest. And until then, remember to live well, enjoy life, and most of all, be a woman living well your way. Bye for now.